That's the microphone and that's the video. Good evening. My name is Matt Lawless and I'm the Scottsville Town Administrator. You're now viewing the Scottsville Town Council special meeting for Thursday, April 29th, 2021. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with the Town of Scottsville's ordinance on the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The public officials who are present for this meeting, either in person or electronically, are the town's mayor, Mr. Ron Smith, council members Lindsey Brown, Zach Bullock, Daniel Gritzko, Laura Malusi, Stuart Munson, and Eddie Payne. Town staff members are also present for this meeting. The public has several opportunities to observe and participate, both in person and online. These are listed at the entrance to the town office and up on the town website. Participation includes the opportunity to comment on relevant matters of town business. If you're viewing this meeting in the future on the town's YouTube channel, thank you very much. The local time here now is 9 minutes to 7, which is the posted start time for the meeting. So I'm going to mute this line here right now. And if you want to skip ahead 9 minutes on your meeting video, you'll see the start of the meeting then. Thank you so much.
Hello. Is anyone else joining you all in the council chambers this evening?
No, sir, we're by ourselves.
Okay. I'm sorry if I look really gross on the camera here. We've left the windows open all day with the heat, and I've come home and my right eye is now trying to swell shut with the pollen. So
You look pretty puffy.
it feels pretty bad, like I've been sucked in the eye or something.
You should see the other guy.
That's right. Yeah, I had to put away my ice pack for the meeting, but I had dug out one of the kids' little frozen teething toys to hold on it for a while there. This wind is really blowing through here.
Yeah, it feels stormy.
It does. I hope we don't have any more power internet related problems.
Yeah, we kind of rely on that now, right?
For better or worse.
It's grind to a halt.
I saw Eddie's email, and Matt, you said you thought that Lindsay wasn't going to be here tonight as well?
That's right. She's out of town for work. She could tune in, but I think she's busy with her work travel.
Okay.
We should have 5.
Hello, Laura.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Aside from some allergy issues, I'm okay.
That's the problem with this beautiful weather, right?
Well, and a house without air conditioning, we rely on a lot of fresh air circulating
Oh, got it.
this time of year. You always remind me when you pop in that there's that wonderful background filter that I can turn on.
Yeah, it's helpful because you still see people behind me, but it's not quite as
That's
floating
right.
around.
No, our pantry closet is just in the kitchen over my left shoulder.
Oh,
And at
this
some
is my
point, if
pantry
anyone
closet.
wants,
Yeah,
if anyone wants a
that's why.
snack during the meeting.
I have a restroom on one side and a pantry on the other side. So yeah, it's high traffic.
That's right.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Zach.
Hey,
It looks like Stuart's connecting as well here.
Let's do it.
Well, if Stuart can connect, we'll have a quorum, our bare minimum of 1. I think we are expecting Dan as well. And perhaps Lindsay tonight, we'll see.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Dan.
hey.
He let me know that he couldn't make it, and I know that Lindsay is traveling on business and might not be able to attend, so this is who we expected.
All right. Well, I've got 7:01, call the meeting to order. I think this is going to be it as far as council people tonight. Other two have obligations and cannot join us. So if you mute and stand, and we'll say the pledge allegiance to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I ask the town clerk to call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Councilor Bullock,
Here.
Councilor Gritsko,
Here.
Councilor Malusi,
Here.
Councilor Munson, are you with us? Looks like he may not be in front of the computer yet, but with the three who are present, we have a quorum.
Okay, let's hold off just a minute or two and see if Stuart can get connected with the audio.
If you need to run down the street, sir, we're here.
In the meantime, item number 2 is for public forum, and I see no public on the screen, and there are no public in the council chambers here. So we'll move to item number 3 as soon as we get Stuart hooked up here. There he is. You with us, Stuart?
No.
Hey. Hey, everybody on board now? There's no public here, Stuart, so we're moving to item number 3 on the agenda. And item A under number 3 is appointment of the expired position on the ARB. And we'll ask Zach to tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, we have an expired term, Bob O'Halloran. His term ended, I don't know, 5 months ago, I guess. He continued serving. Unbeknownst to us, he snuck his way onto the board. In any event, we posted the position properly, and he was the only one who applied, and the board approved his, we voted to make a motion to all of you that we would like him to continue serving, and so that's what we're approving tonight.
Okay, would you like to make that official motion that Bob be reappointed?
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Mr. Robert O'Halloran to a term of 4 years with the ARB.
And is there a second?
I second
Second.
that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? No one opposed, then the motion passes, and we will notify Bob of his next 4-year obligation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. You know, it's been a crazy year, so we that made a slip through without us realizing it. Item B is our other business item this evening, and that's working on the budget, so we can hopefully get that nailed down and have our public hearing next month on that and be finished with it. So I had let me make a couple of comments, and then we'll get into things. And what I had been thinking about prior to our scheduled meeting last week was that we've all seen how things change quickly. And we started talking about the budget when things were really tight. And then the next thing we knew, we were going to receive a big handful of federal money, and that changed things as far as the budget was concerned. And then as we just continued our discussions, we looked at different ways that federal funding could help us, and a number of good suggestions were offered. So using some of that funding now seems appropriate to me. Looking at how we can use some of the funding to ensure the future of Scottsville is also an appropriate move. And I really feel that some form of an infrastructure bill is going to get passed. It may be 6 months from now, but I feel like we may get something out of that also. The main thing I am concerned about right at the moment is we talked about a real estate tax, and I think that's something that we're going to need here in the future, but not right now. We still have people in town that are experiencing difficulties due to pandemic-related challenges. And I think, to me, passing the real estate tax right now is somewhat cruel to the general population. Even though we might advertise it as part of our public hearing, and we know that a small tax is customarily something the population does not like, and I don't want any of us to be accused of doing something shady or behind somebody's back. And we saw what happened with the West End area, West End small area plan, where we went actually door to door. We had 2 public hearings. We passed out brochures, and we still have people complaining they didn't know what was going on. So what my thought is, let's delay implementing a real estate tax until next budget cycle. And in the meantime, you know how the word's going to get out that we're looking at a real estate tax. It will happen. And then in June, where I'm obligated to give a state of Scottsville report, I will indicate to everyone that a real estate tax is on the horizon and will most likely be implemented, and that'll give a whole year for people to get it into their system that we are going to have a real estate tax with next year's budget, not with this one. So I appreciate everybody's hard work on what we're doing, and I appreciate everybody's concern for the welfare of Scottsville. And what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Matt and let him get things started on the budget discussion.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I can, as you said, I can walk through some of how this budget has changed over the past few months and show where we stand now with options, and then a couple of decision points for this meeting. But mostly we're kind of checking the general temperature and seeing if council's ready to call the official public hearing up on May 17th and advertise a proposed budget with your tax rates. So I've got, if you'll bear with me, a few slides on it that guide our thoughts and show you the numbers. I appreciate, I think it was Mr. Bullock's suggestion to show which line items were changing and kind of how the federal funds move through our budget, so you can see a before and after. I hope this presentation tells that story. So town council positioned itself pretty well for this situation by thinking back in December about capital project needs and the town's backlog of deferred maintenance and also construction goals for the future. From all of our committees, we collected different priorities for things that had been neglected that we had to try to spruce up, or things that we wanted to buy or build to do a better job of meeting your goals in the future. And we did that work in December and January at our work sessions without a good idea of how much federal aid was coming. So then when it did arrive, we had a pretty good to-do list that we could go to and say, these are the goals that we already thought were important. How can we use the new funding to help achieve that? So that's an example of good planning meeting the moment. So we have these new resources to work with now, and we're still in our normal budget calendar, looking towards the special meeting we're in today and the public hearing coming up next month. Again, our budget adoption is required by June 30th, and it helps us from a bookkeeping perspective to adopt it a little bit sooner and get everything ready. Remembering back towards March, this was the work session presentation that I gave you at that time. It was assuming a slow economic recovery. If you look at that local revenues number, the 509 is smaller than the 526 over to its left. We were expecting the new year to be not quite as strong on local revenues as the past. We assumed that some federal aid was coming in. We put a $100,000 placeholder in there. This was when the American Rescue Plan was in negotiations and before it was passed. We didn't know what extent that aid would be, but it was necessary just to keep the lights on. We had the bare minimum of staff raises and service improvements. We didn't have a decision from the DMV at that time, so there's no DMV select in the space budget. It did assume increases to the cigarette tax and the real estate tax just in order to get to that 509 number. Without those small tax increases, this revenue number is even lower. This is still a good way of describing a conservative middle to low type of budget scenario. If you set aside most of the federal money and you made a pretty conservative economic assumption, you could still run with this budget. So I still hold to this as a good example of doing our basic needs, nothing special, but keeping on pretty much the same as we are now. There's the federal revenue assumption. It's it also includes jumping on the USDA police loan for the police vehicle and IT improvements. Town Council's already approved that, and we expect to have that funding and make those purchases before the end of the current year. So your supplemental budget adoption includes this 161 number, which is higher than the CARES Act funding only that we were at before. There's new USDA money in here. Timing. Just 3 days after our work session, Congress passed and the President signed the American Rescue Plan. This is one of the largest domestic spending bills the federal government has ever passed. And it's the largest flexible aid that has ever gone to American state and local governments. In the past, when there's been these kinds of federal supports, they've been to very specific projects like build the interstate highway system. This is far more flexible with fewer strings attached. So that $350 billion line spread among 50 states and 19,000 municipalities means about $500,000 for Scottsville. That's in addition to the individual money that most of us should have received by this point, expanded unemployment insurance that some of our neighbors are collecting now, tax credits that you might have seen when you filed your family taxes this year. Our county school system are getting some special assistance to reopen. Restaurants have special relief programs, veterans aid. So many of these different slices of the bill benefit the Scottsville community. This is the unrestricted money that's helping the town of Scottsville and our local government budget. With that in mind, the proposal that we talked around with project ideas and brought back at work session 2 weeks ago included this large increase in federal aid. The economic forecast stays mostly the same though. We haven't been able to parse in the news what this federal aid is going to do for the overall economy. You see price increases in things like construction, but you also still see a lot of reluctance in fields like tourism. So I'm reluctant to say that the local economy is just going to take off because of all of this extra spending. If that didn't pan out and we juiced our meals tax revenue estimate and then it didn't happen, we'd be in a bad way. So the local revenue assumption stays pretty much the same. We do have the new federal aid money, and we add the DMV select line item in here because we've now had that contract offer and approval from the state. So you see the increase in federal aid in these two lines. The federal spending comes into the town in two checks, one coming up in the next few weeks and the other at the same time next year. So that shows up as the new federal revenue. That's these lines. That's the increase. Going back here just a second, you see the state revenue increases. That's the expected effect of the DMV. And also the grant money for the Outdoors Foundation. So if you accept the Outdoors Foundation grant and purchase that wetland easement, that's $80,000. We also have $72,000 of expected DMV revenue coming back in. That's why the state number goes back up. It's just coincidence that the 257,000 is the same in both lines. The total of all of our state revenue happens to be almost exactly the same as our first half ARPA money. You see the local town revenue stays almost exactly the same. We took a couple of our local lines slightly down with the economic forecast, but that's about the same. The revenue line that runs the lowest and takes a hit is our own interest earnings. That's the kind of dark side of the Federal Reserve action. Interest rates are at rock bottom, and so the interest that we earn on our savings accounts is back down to almost nothing. Nothing that we can do about that. So in this budget on the spending side, you see DMV Select as a new department category that wasn't there before. The top half is what you saw in March. The bottom half is what you saw in April. So we add DMV Select as a new department with one full-time and 2 part-time positions to staff it. And then benefits costs for the 1 full-time position, computers, furniture. It runs as a $100,000 department, which is our 3rd largest after police and administration. American Rescue Plan funding filters through into most of these line items. So as I show you the project details in the next couple of slides, you'll see how the line items are impacted by the funding. We'll show the ARPA increase in each of these. The timing of our budget cycle makes this pretty easy. When it comes time for us to account to the feds of how we spent the ARPA money, it'll be a pretty straightforward before and after of March is what we would have spent. April is what we're able to spend because of the extra ARPA funding. So we can point down to itemized receipts if we have to. Here are the things that we bought with the ARPA funding that we wouldn't have been able to in this base budget. It's clear which line items are going up. You see a little bit of the sector change here. Capital improvements goes way up. We're much better able to make capital improvements that would have languished without clear funding. We see big investments in that in this budget. The tourism and economic development category is the one that has the largest percentage increase. It went from being a very small line item here in the March recommendation, almost 3 times larger here in April. We can do a lot more in tourism, and that makes sense given the town's economic focus and the kind of investment in the growing economy that we want to make. So what are these project priorities? Town Council talked about those together. You had some of those one-on-one conversations as well as more work session time. What can we do to really help revitalize our community consistent with the goals of this law? Launching the DMV Select is one of those. By building up the basic services of the town, we can support our state government partners and bring body heat and activity to Main Street. The folks who come here for the DMV Select have a good opinion of Scottsville, maybe go out and get some lunch after their appointments. That's relevant. Improving the streetscapes and landscaping. We want to encourage folks to go walk around outside, healthy physical activity, and having a beautiful space to go and do that certainly helps. We also know that there's a strong connection between a good looking streetscape and tourism and related spending. This is one of the things that our downtown business partners feel is most important to their business success. If that streetscape, the parks and landscaping don't look good, they know that that affects their business. That also connects the broader field of parks enhancements. We know that parks are a reason that people come to town to visit and a reason why they choose to live here and start families. So as we can enhance our parks, plan new parks, and improve the ones we have, that helps the town's long-term economic recovery. Enhancing the community partnerships that we can't do it all by ourselves. And we know we have strong partners in the owners of our historic buildings, in our museum, our Chamber of Commerce, a growing Main Street Community Alliance. If we invest a little bit in those partnerships, the town's overall economic recovery will be healthier and more stable. Finally, the essential infrastructure, our public safety staff, and the basic operations of town government. We have to sustain those at a basic level or nothing else that the town works on can be safe and effective. So we maintain that basic level of investment and achieve some neglected projects that we knew were important. These are the numbers that go with those 5 project ideas. This comes out to about half of the the overall federal funding. It splits into two batches of 257,000. These 5 project goals going into, excuse me, we've got a couple more guests on the call. Okay. So you put those 5 projects together, you arrive at about half of the project funding. And that leaves well over half, 264,000 to assign in the next 3 fiscal years. We have until December 31st, 2024 to complete all of the spending. So we can look at the results of these projects, continue them further, or take on new ones based on the results. It's probably, that's not the plan, all of it going out the first 3 years.
Sorry, Matt, quick question. We had talked a little bit about putting somebody into business development, hosting some kinds of maybe business competitions, or helping people with grants,
Yes, sir.
or very low interest loans. That's not in here at all. Is that assumed in the second half, or is that part of what's here?
A couple of these projects don't have a whole lot of detail yet on them. There is $25,000 in this partnerships line for Main Street economic development. I don't have a lot of programming detail on that yet. So if you wanted to use that funding for part of a business launch or other incentive program, you could certainly do that.
Also, a comment on that, Stuart. I know we were talking today about, or in our email, that grant opportunity, which sounds like a different source of money, which also sounds like a really, really good program, especially in terms of its ability to help business owners get started. Which Kelly and I have reflected is sort of something that's really needed for folks getting started and to attract people down here. So, as I'm thinking about what this money's going to, I sort of thought, when you mentioned that, I thought of that grant sort of as a separate thing that if we got, would actually sort of fill in the hole of some of that work.
The prize money on that grant program does have a pretty significant match portion to it. So I think even at the intermediate level there, you're looking at a $20,000 commitment on the part of the town to the cash prize. At the highest level there, where the prize gets as big as $90,000, the town has to commit $30,000 to it, to the prize alone, and then some other commitment of.
There's the money.
Yeah.
Yes, my question.
Sure. Do you want to see a little more detail on those 5 projects and the line items? Okay.
Sure.
There we go. So that's the 5 of them. DMV Select is a new department and a new function of the town. We use the federal funding to launch this, but we would aim for it to be self-sustaining in the future. We've got some local examples from small towns like Madison and Mineral and Remington, and then our closest city hall neighbors in Charlottesville. They launched this service there at Charlottesville City Hall only 2 years ago. It did not turn a profit in 2019, but it did turn a profit and pay its own way in 2020. So that lines up pretty well with our staff estimates of the traffic on this the same way, that in the first year of this budget, it's not a profit center. I think it would very likely be in the second year and ongoing. Here in this budget, we're spending $99,000 of ARPA funding in operations, $15,000 in capital, and then it's returning $72,000 in general fund revenue from the state. In starting up a program like this, the personnel costs are the biggest. That's the wages, benefits, and training. There are incidental costs for office supplies and technology, but most of what you're dealing with in the spending is the impact of staffing in the department. So you see that in the budget simply as a new category, which becomes the town's third largest. That's the payroll, supplies, and IT lines built in that department, the same as how our other departments are set up. There's also a capital impact in both the current fiscal year and the future as we refit the office space. We convert the center conference room into the offices for the new workers.
Matt,
Yes,
what is that projected profit to be after 2 years?
it has varied in our examples. I would look for break even and small surplus that would go in. Thomas, in your records, I think the largest number that you ever saw was Remington at a $40,000 surplus on a $150,000 program.
That's
So,
right.
So that-
okay. So you're expecting in year 2 that you would have enough to basically fully pay for the staffing in year 3 is what it looks like.
Yes,
Again, not a guarantee, but it's possible.
certainly not a guarantee, but possible.
Okay, thank you.
And that one's the largest. The other 4 projects that we're going to look at are smaller and have very specific line item impacts. We know about the economic value to tourism from streetscapes and landscaping, and this is one of the services that we hear some of the strongest demand that we do a better job and step up our partnership. So in this project proposal, we're using $27,000 of ARPA funding to do more tree work, more contracted maintenance, and more investment in our own staff. What we've found is that in reducing our maintenance staff from full-time to part-time, we now aren't able to hit all of the needed projects on a daily basis. And even when we add some contracted service for seasonal, some things are still falling behind on a daily basis, just for lack of person hours on the work. I think the easiest way to fix that permanently and ensure that we have hardworking, highly motivated and skilled staff that is efficient after full time. So that creates a personnel impact to get the other 25% out of that full-time equivalent position. We are also able to do a capital investment in street signs. These are the seasonal banners and also entrance signs and wayfinding signage all around town. That still needs design work. We haven't bought wayfinding signs in about 10 years. So that's one that will be a little slower to deliver. The other items could happen right away this summer. That money pops up in a sales line.
Sorry, Matt, can I pause you for a second there? Zach, could we ask you to mute? We're picking up a lot of wind noise from your mic. Thank you. Sorry.
The largest impact of this project is in streets, and that's where the personnel cost lies. Again, staffing, wages and benefits drive most of the town budget. So when you scale up a position and pay for more people, that's where it hits the budget. This project doesn't bring back direct revenue to the town, but it probably helps stabilize our business taxes. If the business success logic is good, you would hope to see a little bit more business license and meals tax revenue. But I don't have enough confidence in that effect to boost the meals tax budget just based on this project. Does that one make sense? Okay. Over in parks enhancements, we had some work session discussion about how best to improve both the existing parks and to plan for new ones. And so there are parks improvements that we've been thinking about for a long time. Plans that we've had for our parks that we haven't been able to get to for lack of immediate funding, and improvements in the park system that we've hoped for a long time, especially around the waterfront. For a riverfront town, we don't have a lot of direct river access, and parts of the riverfront have been real eyesores or environmental concerns. So this funding gives us the opportunity to plan improvements on that. In this project idea, we put $18,000 directly into capital spending, especially in the Van Cleef Nature area. The entrance road needs work, trails, fines, and footbridges need work, and the lake facilities have called out for partnership for a long time. The State Department of Wildlife Resources committed a floating dock to us several years ago and haven't delivered it. If they need a little bit of match funding, this would be the way to do I don't have real precise detail on those project needs. We would need our Parks Committee to step up and get some detail on there. But this would provide some capital infusion to begin to put those deals together. Items like small signs in the parks and basic hardware aren't capital, so you put those in the operations line for parks just because they're not very expensive, but a little bit of money can go a long way on signage. The other capital investment is at the James River waterfront. That's a new line item. We've never put capital spending directly in our waterfront. That's a project that we can track in the future. Most of this operational impact on the budget goes into the capital funding line, $28,000 into this large line. Again, I'm not sure where the direct revenue impact on that is. As we improve and publicize our parks, we would hope to see more use and some knock-on effect from local businesses, but it's hard for me to say what that would be, and I wouldn't want to guarantee it. I think the Riverfront partnership is a really interesting idea, but I'm not certain what form that takes, whether we hire a consultancy with the James River Association or work with our local green infrastructure center. It could be that having a little bit of this money going into a deal with CSX helps to get something done. Or maybe we're paying for spot improvements on the parts of the riverfront that are the easiest to work with, like the existing boat launch facilities or the existing picnic area. We could help improve those spots, and $10,000 goes a long way when it's buying picnic tables like that. So that's a little up in the air and needs discussion, but I think this way of capitalizing the funding really lets us do some good. Thoughts on this one?
Quick question. So for these line items, are they like earmarks, or are they just what we think we're going to spend them on at this point right now, or proposals?
The way that you see this laid out is the category totals.
Yeah.
This is the town's commitment of not to exceed spending.
Yep.
At the staff level, I cannot spend more than the amount of money shown here without
Okay.
getting a supplemental fund.
Okay.
Within this, we have that line item detail, like $10,000 on the waterfront.
Yeah.
I take that as instruction, but can shift it a little bit based on the actuals. So if we ended up at a $12,000 project idea instead of 10,000, as long as the staff can achieve capital savings somewhere else, it's okay to do that. The strongest cost control that you as council have is at this category level, where the staff cannot spend more than this amount of money without a supplemental.
Okay. But within the parks and enhancements, if we decide we want to spend $10,000 more on Van Cleef, could we do that and just not spend any on the waterfront, or we decide we want to spend all of it on the waterfront, none of it on Van Cleef? Are we able to do that? Do we have that flexibility?
Yeah, your line item detail budget looks like this. And so outside of that capital total, there are all of these line items.
Yep.
So this is what we track and report to you in the monthly financial report.
Yeah.
For example, if it got to be halfway through the year and the waterfront project wasn't getting anywhere, but there was an urgent need over at Van Cleef, we could work on that together, and you wouldn't need a special vote.
Okay.
To effectively shift that.
Okay.
Well, Matt, to follow up on something that Stuart just brought up, one of the things we had talked about and I had mentioned, and I don't see it listed here, was the funding of a dock for the Van Cleef Nature Area, Scottsville Lake. And I'm not saying that that has to be in here, but I'm a little surprised it's not. So I guess, how did that get deleted?
Yeah, it's not deleted. It's in there. There's one line item for Van Cleef Nature Area, and that includes all of the improvements in the nature area. So there's $20,000 here that would be available as match for the dock.
So you're saying it's just a number, but it's not specifically saying it's doing for a particular thing.
Correct. So we have it, this 18,000 is where that match funding sits. It doesn't say specifically dock, but it could be used for that.
Was there some other use that has been earmarked, or am I missing something?
Not that I know of.
Okay, all right. And again, I'm not at the moment saying that in this bigger conversation, we have to go over that in huge detail. The reason it got brought up was as we thought about a structure that if you had to say what was something that was within our grasp or we were very close to getting, that was something that it could also be that if we get the those who had originally going to fund something there to help and then we matched it or something. So, okay, so that's helpful. Thank you, Matt.
Yes.
So yeah, our hope is that 18,000 would be enough then to cover some amount of work on all three of those priorities listed there: road improvements, trail improvements, and improvements to the lake facilities, or a combination of, depending on your preferences, council.
Right.
So I'd like to raise a couple of comments, both about streets and landscaping and overlapping with the parks enhancement discussion. Starting with the streets and landscaping, one of the things that resonates, especially in conversations with many individuals over the last month, is that what is most important, and Matt, you actually said this in this meeting, to our existing businesses as well as our residents, is the care of the town. How does the appearance look? How's the landscaping being kept? How's the trash being kept up? How's the weeding? How are the creeks being cared for? How's the river look? How's the boat landing? Like, that is what's most noticeable. That's what's most immediate. My thoughts on that, though, is that we can't fix that with a one-time fund for 2 years. That this is a long-term change in how we operate going forward. So whatever kind of investments or things need to be addressed in that gap or in those current existing gaps, we also need to have a way to take care of them long-term and not just look at it as using ARP funds to fix it and it's going to go away. This is something that has to be maintained overall. So we currently have 8+ individuals or contractors that we're working with to cover our streetscape and landscaping needs. And yet we're still getting the feedback that we're not quite meeting the bar. Yeah. So we've reached out to them. We're going to try and get everyone at the same table. But one of the unknowns in this current proposal is what is it that they're lacking? Some of it's staffing. So with one person doing landscaping over a summer in the most intense time, like one pair of hands is not as efficient as 2 pair of hands, right? 2 people doing mulch, one's got a wheelbarrow, one's scooping. It's just more efficient. You get the work done if you've got one person. There's also just the joy of the work and having somebody to work with. So it makes me want to talk a bit more about the staffing moving to full-time, if that's truly addressing the streetscape landscaping needs of the town. Is having somebody full-time addressing the actual needs that we have, or is there flexibility where we could pay somebody 12 months, but with the understanding in their contract that they may be working intense long hours over the summer, and they may basically have a 2 or 3 month kind of leave in the winter when there's just really not that much work to do. Like, is that something that could be worked into a full-time position or not? So that's one question I have, because I really would like to get this improved.
Sure. On how to structure that kind of job,
Yeah.
you'll run into the additional overtime cost if it's going, over 40 in a week and then idle in the winter.
That's her wage versus the salary, though, right? That's a difference.
That's true. If you could certainly stretch this personnel budget out if these retirement and healthcare costs went away and you have a pool of part-time funding and have 2 or 3 people working in the summer and only 1 part-time in the winter. You've got this total personnel cost of about $50,000. If you put that all into wages and nothing into healthcare and retirement, you can have more people working more hours.
At that point, if we're thinking about staffing or how to take care of these things, if there is a busy season where more work needs to be done more regularly, I mean, it almost just sounds like we need to contract that work out to somebody, for this set of time instead of keeping it in-house and trying to figure out how to hire someone.
Well, I think that's where I'm sort of again, there's eight different bodies doing the work. One of them is ours, right? In terms of the town budget, like in terms of staffing. So I'm just not fully convinced that moving somebody to full-time will fix the need without also giving them the resources to do the job. So what's missing in this proposal is the added mulch, right? It's the added flowers. It's the doing the extra spray wash. It's the extra tree trimming that's not getting done, right? Those kinds of things I don't currently see here, but I'm also not convinced that using one-time federal funding is going to fix that if we don't have a mechanism to pay for it long-term. So it's a bigger question and observation.
Mhm.
The public boat landing I've discussed with many of you. I don't know if I got to everyone with this, but again, that's not our space, but it is one of the most visible spaces to both business users, to the public, to people, both residents and guests, to Scottsville, right? Everybody sees that space, just like they see Valley Street, Main Street, and Uptown. And so if there's some kind of, if that, I do see a one-time investment could completely transform that to a point where then we can actually maintain and keep it, right? If we could fix the grading, get some grass in there, make the parking, like that is a one-time investment that I see having a long-term impact.
Yeah.
But it makes me uncomfortable when staff are saying, I don't quite know how to do that. We don't quite know how to manage that. So I'm not sure how to launch, I'm not sure then how to sort of release and launch that.
Well, one thing about that, Laura, because I agree. I think the boat launch needs to be tended to. But that's the most accessible part of the river, and that's what people want, right? That's where they want to go. That's what they want to see. That's where they want to be, and we want to use it, right?
It's
Festival.
It's also what we're defined as, right?
We're defined as a river town. And so the money there, in terms of it in capital investment, in my conversation with James River Association a few weeks ago, but it sounded like the most heavy lifting would be coming up with a conceptual plan for the site. And so I think that is what we would need to make to then work with the Department of Wildlife Resources to come up with a joint partnership like they have in Richmond around the James River. And I've got two names, Brad Moyer and Ron Hughes, that we should reach out to. I'm not sure who the best person is to do that. We should talk about it because we should talk to them and say, hello, we'd like a joint partnership with you like you have in Richmond right here. What do you need from us to make that happen? And then we can say, okay, so how much is that conceptual plan going to cost? What kind of information do we need? We can talk as a council about what that space could be like. And then from there, as you've mentioned before, Laura, the longer term maintenance, seating, et cetera, could be done through some more low cost community partnerships. Because you've mentioned ACE can make donations. James River Reeling and Rafting has experience with that kind of stuff. And so if the money up front sounds like coming up with the design for the site and the plan for long-term maintenance.
Yeah.
And so I think that is where we need to do some homework. I mean, I'm good with this plan moving forward. I feel good about that. And I feel like this is where the money needs to go, especially as it relates to parks and whatnot. But I think we need to be pretty, I would like to be speedy about reaching out to these departments.
Right.
These two guys at the Department of Wildlife Resources to find out what they need from us to start doing that work.
Okay, so that, Jack, your comments build nicely into my, addressing the future plans. So the Van Cleve Nature Area, the James River access, that future planning, I think it would behoove council to take some time to build the conversations, to build the partnerships, to get the information so that the plan that we are asking for and then passing on to the future really is attainable. Because I think there's some time in putting pause on all of this investment in the future parks system to take that, to really do our homework, but also to give the staff a chance to do the work that they're already doing. Like they're potentially launching a DMV Select. That's a big deal, right? That's a lot of time. We're increasing our involvement with economic development, right? So to be able to focus on those things and again, build the partnerships in the parks, I think would be super helpful. The other comment that I got and observation that I have with the parks, the comment is that right now our trail system is for residents only and it doesn't serve the public. Again, an argument to invest in those really public spaces primarily first, and secondarily find means to take care of the local spaces. Second, I did some research on public spaces. Dan, you will love this. Our Scottsville Lake is the smallest lake in a huge area of parks that is stocked with fish. It is the smallest, which makes us super, super special. But it's also a context of where we're at, right? We are also the smallest lake. So what does that look like in terms of investment of time and effort and money too? So it's a blessing that we have it. I think it's great for our local business, especially that it's opened up. But is that where we put a lot of our time into something like that, or is there something else that's actually a higher priority? So those are my two comments.
Laura, one thing to follow up
Yeah.
with you just on that particular comment. This is just it might be helpful because this council wasn't around whenever we started that relationship years ago. But one of
That's
the reasons our partners chose to work with us was actually because it's small, meaning one of the things they liked about it is they wanted to put fish in a place that would be caught by people who were able to go fish there. So in other words, they themselves looked at it as kind of the right size. It's actually a little bit bigger than Wilkins Lake in Winchester, which is probably the most fished trout area that I know. I mean, it's very, very successful area. At any rate, it was just noting to you that the size was a key factor to our partners in choosing to work with us. And I think you're right in noting that.
I have a couple of questions about the dock, Dan, and I don't know if you remember the details. First, is the dock for like a pier to fish off of, or is it so that kayaks and boats can actually get into the water?
What the idea is actually creating access. So it mostly had to do with the ability for people with disabilities to be able to have access to the water. The same difficulty exists at the lake as exists at the river. It's hard to get to. And the other aspect about it was, through a lot of research, it was going to be one that would actually be, it was floatable. In other words, it was a floating dock because there is some variance in the level of Scottsville Lake.
Okay, so because of how we use it for flood system and so forth. And is there a particular dock that they have to use? Because now there's other docks on the market and that you could go buy a dock. Well, apparently from the Home Depot, which I was there like, really?
That's right. We could, that's kind of right. So yes, what it was is we were trying to find a dock. There was a model that they were using at the time that was, I forget which other lake it was used in, but we could go back and find the particular design. They had designated $15,000 is what was going to be
done. I
it
remember
was
you
in their
told me
budget.
that. Yeah.
So anyways, that design, it doesn't have to be at that particular design, but the focus of it was given a place for people to go take pictures, to fish, to enjoy the lake, to be able to have a picnic, whatever they wanted to.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
One last thing that reminded me, there is a lot of movement in Congress nationwide for scenic river viewshed support and efforts. And that's part of the reason I think some planning would be really helpful, because there's a lot of work that we could each do to reach out to state, to county, to state, to federal partners to see what those steps are, what they're looking for in that, because I think we've got a fabulous river on a fabulous town, but we're limited in our access to it. So, thank you.
So you make a good point about the staffing budget. So there's a total number in there that's split up between wages and benefits. You don't have to decide now about full-time or part-time staffing and the number of people. If you advance the total number that's in there now, the knock-on costs to a full-time position are about $19,000. So if you keep that top line total and then choose to rearrange that between full-time and part-time, you could say that you have $19,000 to work with as either a full-time position or one or two new part-time positions.
Out of that 27 that you've designated right now.
Yeah,
Okay,
the position change cost is 19,000.
okay.
So if you would rather have one or two part-time positions, you can make that choice anytime in the next month.
For the Outdoors Foundation grants in the wetlands, is that in the 2021 budget, or is that also in one of these two areas proposals for 21, 22?
It's in 22. It shows.
It is, okay.
It's a capital cost for the purchase of the easement, and then some minor admin costs for survey and contracting.
So was that in one of these particular priority areas then?
No, it's not.
You just built it into the budget proposal?
It's
Okay,
the base as grant money,
okay,
getting and then spending.
Okay.
It's state grant money, not federal.
okay, great, thank you.
Do you want to make the personnel change now or think about that?
Knowing that we have a conversation hopefully coming up, I'm not sure the response on that invite that you sent out.
Okay.
I think leaving it flexible is important. I just don't necessarily want to put it forward as if this is moving to a full-time position. I think this is the amount of money we're putting aside to address the needs so that we can still have that conversation before the public meeting. I don't know how that works, but if that's possible.
Yep, we can leave it as a category total. And then
I think that would behoove us to give us some flexibility in the conversation.
Okay.
If I can add, and if this is too specific, you can tell me to mute my mic, or you can mute me. But I appreciated your comments, Laura, about sort of what resources we need to keep up our landscape, mulch or things like that, for example, especially now that the rocks have been dug out of half the beds along East Main Street. I don't know where those rocks went or if they're coming back.
They're under the boats.
Oh, they're under the boat.
They're in wheelbarrow dumps under the boats. They still yet to be spread out. Yes.
Oh,
That was
okay.
at our arborist's recommendation. They retain too much heat for the trees.
Oh, that's good to know. My point about this is actually mulch and cover for trees, because in cities like Miami, which down there they've got like this like mat. It's like water absorbent, but like weeds don't grow through it. And so I'm also thinking like because that's the big issue, weeds all the time. I think Nancy's on this call. In any event. And so that stuff stops other stuff from growing because it like smothers out the sun, it snuffs it out, but it also allows water to drain through. And so I don't know who should look into this, but that's a material that would be worth investing in long term because it cuts down on our maintenance costs because we don't have to have someone out there weeding. And so I would recommend that as something that specifically as something we look into purchasing as part of this landscaping upkeep, just as part of how since we need to replace those rocks anyway, as a place to put the money in a smart sort of material.
Zach, that's not what you're describing. It's thicker than a ground cloth. It's like,
yeah,
you're describing something that's like a rubberized sort of
yes.
training. Okay, I see.
Yeah. I think that would be a smart move. My other comment too, and this doesn't have to do with the budget, but it does have to do with how we sort of hustle up and get the information we need. Nancy left the meeting. I wonder if I said something that offended her. But how we're going to hustle up and get the information we need to sort of move forward with some of these things, because I know staff's going to be busy with DMV Select stuff. That's a lot of heavy lifting and worth the effort. So some of these things are going to need to be delegated to us. I am happy to take on reaching out to the Department of Wildlife Resources if that's okay with folks, just like get information. But I feel like we're going to need to start doing that because we've got a lot of different things moving and town staff isn't going to have all the time to do it. And by the time we wait around, the 4 years is going to go by. So anyway, I maybe at our next work session when there are more of us together, we should take a look at these priorities again, aside from the budgetary conversation, just say, okay, so here are the things we want to do. Who wants to pick up finding out XYZ information and bring it back to us so that we know what to do next?
Yep, and the volunteer committees have been tremendously helpful with that. Planning Commission and ARB are carrying a lot on their plates right now. Government Services Committee has been super helpful with the DMV launch. Parks and Trails volunteers stepping up. economic development doing more. So you're all there. But you're right. There's a limit to how many balls the staff can juggle. And if we want to do more, we need to pick up some more project management, and maybe council can help with that a little bit. A couple more of these to show, and we've spoken to some of the partnership work already. So you saw the landscaping and the parks improvements. Getting some more community partnership help. Architectural Review Board had really good results and feedback from their facade grant work. So the base budget had some continuation of that to help both commercial and residential building owners improve their buildings, to provide some incentive with what the ARB does. We also want to connect that to low-income housing stabilization, maybe through a partnership with Albemarle's Housing Improvement Program for some home renovations and fix-ups. The expanded community partnership in a big way comes through some version of the Main Street program. There's a few different ways to do this. I wish I had more detail to share on what this was going to look like. So this $25,000 at this point is mostly a placeholder of some kind of innovative economic development work that touches on the Main Street principles of small business partnerships, filling downtown spaces, investing in events, culture, quality of life, and building a healthy, traditional Main Street economy. We could do that by contracting with a partner agency, a new nonprofit or an existing one. You could pay the Chamber of Commerce to do work. You could work with the Scottsville Museum. You could start a new Main Street nonprofit, or you could put this money into matching for an established state granting program, a business launch, a facade program. There's a few different things to do here, but it sounds like there's plenty of interest in some kind of new economic development partnership that focuses on the aspects of community that we like the most. That goes into the tourism and economic development line in both places. So that's a big line item increase. It lets the ARB continue what it's doing and adds a new economic development program. We've got time to figure out what that is, but I think there's consensus on doing something new to help local businesses. Thoughts there?
So I'll just add, this really came out of looking at what other localities, small, medium, and large, have to help their economic development and growth, right? So what were the structures that existed that they had that we might have been lacking? And I found that this point person was one of the things that we don't have, that was the lead on many of the grant fundings, the lead on coordinating events, the lead on building partnerships with businesses, the lead on attracting new businesses and having those conversations. So that's what kind of led to some of this. The chamber is super excited about it, but I've learned in the conversations that the town is not eligible for additional Main Street programming without a person in a role like this. So it doesn't have to be funded by the town. It shouldn't be funded by the chamber because they do sort of lobbying, right? So in most locations, it's its own nonprofit group or authority, development authority, like ABBA. Think about the broadband authority, right, that the county set up that creates this. So other communities have an economic development authority or a tourism authority where this kind of position is housed. And many of them did start with seed money from the local government, and then they found other ways to fund it. So I wanted to add that to the conversation. The other thing is Yancey School Community Center it's like night and day in the work that they've been able to do with one coordinator. So they have a point of contact, they have their calendar, they have their publicity, they have their PSAs, because there's one person that everybody knows to kind of go to. And we have tried to meet that need within our location, but it just isn't there for Scottsville. So I think it would relieve a lot of pressure on the volunteers that are trying to help coordinate events to have, one point of contact. I do want to acknowledge with community partnerships, DMV Select is an action step towards this, and it's self-funding, hooray. But again, we don't have somebody to coordinate with the CACVB directly. We don't have somebody to reach out to the county. We don't have somebody that again is working with a small business association or potentially even this grant, or somebody that sort of lays out a plan for advertising. So I do see this as a gap. I'm not 100% convinced that it's a person for this amount of money, because again, I want something that's sort of self-funding and self-supporting. But it definitely is a need that we have in the community, and I think would get some support. It's just we need to flesh out what that is. I'm not sure we're quite there.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting problem, because it begins to feel, we begin to feel kind of top heavy bureaucratically, in terms of like what we're paying for, in terms of like, or especially if it's, another organization that we're founding to, connect with different programs, and so I guess that's just what I'm thinking about long term when it comes to that. I guess I'm also kind of impressed with what this town does without that too. I mean, there's also an element of when there's stuff here, people come, and we're able to advertise or have events, so I don't know. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't know if we, are you saying this is something as a long-term plan or something that we need to start planning for now?
I've just identified what the difference is, right? I know that's the difference. That's the difference between us and somebody else. Does it have to be a paid staff person? No. But if we have a position dedicated towards it, it does open up other funding opportunities to the town that we can't currently explore. I don't know whether it has to be full-time or part-time. Matt, do you happen to remember?
Doesn't have to be full-time, no.
So it could be, it could be that we coordinate with 3 different nonprofits, right? And name a person that the community, tourism coordinator, right? That they have that title, then we would become eligible in partnering with those organizations for the grants.
Yeah, to me, this feels like the other side of something like a competition to or a new business competition to see if we can find somebody to fill the dollar store. So that's very targeted, that's very micro, that's very specific,
right.
But it's focused and it could have a huge impact on the town.
Yeah.
If we could get something viable in there. On the other hand, it's very targeted and specific. So, it's fulfilling that space, whereas this is helping us to sort of promote the town and all of the spaces in town. And I'm not sure, I need to think a little bit about where we get the most bang for our buck on that.
Yeah.
We're going to have X amount of dollars to put toward one of the two or both of these. How do we do that? But I think it's the two are complementary. If there's some way that we could do that, that would be huge.
So I think where I'm at is, yes, I definitely want to do an investment in this area. I'm just not sure we've fleshed out exactly what that is. So maybe this is something where we sort of, again, work towards those partnerships and flesh it out. And if we get ready in the middle of the year, then we can do an adjustment to the budget, right? But if we're not, we've got that year and we know that next year's budget, this is something we will have fleshed out. Like it just helps us decide, okay, we've got this priority. We're going to come up with a plan for a park and we're going to come up with a plan for community partnership. And we're going to agree to work on it and have action steps, but it removes it out of the budget discussion, if that makes sense.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with the different types of focus and different types of activities. And I struggle the same way in recommending which works best, because they both have value.
They do.
But I'm not sure that we can do it all at the same time.
Right. I'd rather do it well.
Yeah. Me too. Get stakeholder advice on which program is right for us. They pointed out that if we went for the full Main Street, we would be the smallest one in the state.
cool, but crazy. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, we've got the
We're
smallest
interested
lake.
in the smallest. We have the smallest stocked lake. We
Yeah.
have the smallest Main Street program. I'm interested in this.
I think we might have the smallest staff. I mean, come on, let's embrace it.
I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say, you want a small town? You got it.
We got it.
yep.
Yeah.
So I got encouragement, but also caution, and we would get help from Richmond in both directions. But they asked us to reflect on what we really thought we could get done, and
Okay.
what was the best thing to take on first.
Okay.
But putting the placeholder in the budget certainly makes sense. We don't have to decide on a program right now. If you just say, here's how much of the funding you want to set aside, we'll figure it out in the next few months. That's okay.
Yeah. And well, I guess my question for council is, do we want a few months or do we want to just put a pause on it for a year? Because there's not, we don't, again, we do need to figure things out. Like if we're launching a new program, we need to be sure to launch it so that we can spend it. But at the same time, most other locations are spending the time. They either have their plans already in file and they're just launching them, or they're taking the time to develop the plans and then they're funding it with ARP funds. So I feel better now about saying some of these things, maybe we can take that time.
Yeah,
to
I
think
agree.
through.
I mean, from a business perspective, we shouldn't go out and start spending money on something unless we got a good plan for how to use it. And
And the
some
DMV
sense of what
select-
the return on their right investment's going
Right.
to be, and be able to compare those.
And the way that I look at this bigger picture is we have a DMV select that we're already committing half of our federal funding to launch before it starts to be self-sustainable. So already half of it's pushed aside, right?
Yeah.
So that leaves the other half.
Yeah, I mean, I think waiting on that is good too. Again, just because of our attention. I mean, I feel like we still need to figure out how we're going to replace the stones around the trees on Main Street. You know, I think I would like to figure that out before we
Immediate.
like get
Yeah.
someone to promote the town.
Okay.
Because I think we should have something for them to promote that in place. So
Yep. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Right, and I appreciate the patience on some of this. There is plenty to do. The last one of these project kind of categories is the one that's the most of a grab bag, but I think there's a thread here of basic infrastructure and safety and legality, kind of risk management, using some of the federal funding to reduce risks that we've known about and infrastructure needs we've had for a while. So this group puts together pay increases in each department beyond the bare minimum. We've seen some pretty high profile and competitive pay increases among our neighbors, and the town has not been able to keep up with that. The additional 2% doesn't get us all the way to what all of our neighbors have done, but it helps, and it addresses some of the concern around like public safety bonuses that many other localities have done, the town has not. We fund the sidewalk partnership with VDOT, at least the engineering phase, to keep that moving. They, as you heard the last time they presented, they're prepared to work with us on the design, and we can look for other match funding in the construction phase. We may get some additional federal help on infrastructure, but having a seat at the table for the design phase costs $10,000, $12,000, and it's something that we now have the ability to do without dipping into our base reserves. We know about capital needs at the pump station, interior work, improving that office a little bit, painting the whole building and insulating it. We pay an absurd electric bill in the wintertime as we're running heaters on a badly ventilated, uninsulated building. Improving that would have some long-term value. We also, in this category, fund the town code update with Unicode. This is 10 years overdue. I don't have a good access to all of our current ordinances, and neither does our attorney. None of that is publicly available online in a fully updated form. It's a legal risk, but we haven't been able to bite the bullet on the legal support cost to get it all updated and online. So this is an opportunity to go ahead and get that done.
So just comment on that last one. I'm still not feeling good about spending $12,000 on sidewalks at this point. It's, to me, if I could take that $12,000 and put it toward bringing some more people into town or helping to develop another business or something like that, that seems like a vastly better use of that money than doing planning for sidewalks that, I don't see, I'm just not sold on that yet. So I would hope that we would have more of a discussion about that before we go ahead and commit those funds.
Absolutely.
I will echo Stuart's comment. I know we do have sidewalks in need of repair. Don't get me wrong. Like the stuff coming down Harrison or whatever there, coming in is rough. I'm still not clear though about sort of what our outstanding commitment is to that project.
They've announced the award. We have not signed the contract.
Right. Oh, I'm just saying that if we decided to, like, for example, go forward with $12,000, how much we'd still be on the hook for. It still sounds like there's some unknowns about the project scope and cost.
They expressed to us in their presentation that, what they've granted us, we would match 80,000 to their 400,000.
Right.
To complete the project, but we would be responsible for overruns on that total budget of 400,000. The engineering phase here, to the comments earlier about potential transportation funds becoming available, kind of keeps the seat at the table, like Matt said, and keeps the engineering process going, as we're seeing here with the ARP funds, having plans ready to go when the money becomes available. Is a significant advantage. And so if you feel like there's a significant opportunity in the future for those transportation funds to become available, I think it's worth considering the investment in keeping that seat at the table.
Mm-hmm. I guess, Stuart also got me thinking about Canal Basin Square. I don't know if we haven't talked about that specifically here, but I mean, like the cost of fixing the packet boat or the bateau that's down there that's busted. So I'm just not, so like, I guess I'm still not clear, and that's good. That would fall under parks. And so in those costs, I don't know. And those are things that are sort of like immediate that need to be done too, now that I'm thinking.
I think a lot of those repairs could sit under capital where this sits as well. So again, going back to the idea that we're simply putting a placeholder in the budget for this, and we can decide later whether or not that's how you want to use it.
Yeah, I guess, but with the sidewalks,
12,000 needed to shift to another capital project from the sidewalks, we could do that later without having to do another appropriation on it.
Got it.
Just be shifting within line items within the capital budget. Now you're right. If you wanted to shift the 12,000 to tourism and economic development from capital improvement, that would require an adjustment to the budget.
Yes. No, I see it under capital. I guess my thing, following up on Stuart, was just that since it has sidewalks next to it, I'm thinking to myself, are we definitely spending it on sidewalks? And it sounds like, no, it's just there. And if we need to move it to a different capital project, we can.
We would always bring it back before, you guys would have the ultimate say before that project moves forward to any next step. This is just sort of putting that placeholder here. And again, all we're discussing tonight is advertisements for the public hearing next week. Okay. So, the staff recommendation would be to advertise your maximum amount that you think you're considering, because at the public hearing next month, you could always dial it back before you approve.
Yeah. Just one comment. Last week, Zach was near me when I was observing a really interesting sign. Do we have an interesting sign fund? I just had to get y'all to laugh just for a second. So, okay, keep going.
Thanks, Dan.
I want.
Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to fill out a bit. So town code, I don't know if you remember, but in December, we had left when we were originally preparing for the budget season that the Government Services Committee would try to tackle that town code project to save the town $10,000. And we did indeed try to tackle that town code project. And here's what we found in that process. I mean, you can do the manual labor, but when you're looking at our current code and another town's code to adopt, and then you realize that code doesn't have some things that are in our code, there's changes there. And then when you look at a third town code, they have other code paragraphs that weren't in the second code that we're adopting. And those become changes, not just updates. And then everybody in the committee had questions for the attorney immediately, just after going through 8 different code sections that we took, a month to review. And that's where it became very apparent to have somebody that understands the code, that has the focus on it, then that code is there for our staff to reference, the planning commission to reference, the public to reference, the police department to reference, and our attorney indeed also has to reference it. It would just enable us to do our jobs that right now we're pretty much handicapped on doing because it's out of date.
Yeah, I know
so it's important. But I went from not wanting to pay $10,000 to please, let's give somebody else. The added packages that the program that government services looking at takes all of it and puts it digitally online, accessible on the website. So that's part of the package deal of them updating the code. And they would update it as state changes are made so that we're not having to track that at a local level. So that's one of the other things that are part of that package.
That makes sense.
Okay.
A lot of sense.
Let's see if I had anything else. Oh, my other big question that has not direct impact on this budget posting, but considerations. There's a number of things that we've already talked about tonight, and we have salary needs ongoing. We have police safety needs ongoing. We have park needs that are ongoing. And that's where the real estate taxes and that conversation is important. I'd said to Mayor Smith that it's better to open the conversation with the public about that. And I'm grateful, Mayor Smith, for your willingness to do so in the new budget year. But if we can start having a year-long conversation about it instead of a 2-month-long conversation next budget cycle, I think it'll just help inform the public. And as you can see, we have a need to address long-term. I learned some startling news that I wanted to share tonight. And when we met with the Board of Supervisors, we talked about the importance of partnering together. Some of this infrastructure plan money that the county is getting still, I don't know if we will or not, they use structures such as their economic development plan, their growth plans, to decide where that money goes. So here's an example. The school is getting a large chunk of that federal funding. They look to the county plan for growth areas, and based on those growth areas, do projections as to their staffing and their capital improvements. The town of Scottsville right now is missing from all of their projections, and that's just in the school. So the reality is that we're also missing in all projections for the roads, for broadband, for water and sewer, for health services, for fire. This is where I'd really like our time and the staff's time to fix that as those federal monies are coming out, because otherwise we're going to miss out on those connections. So it felt really important to say that tonight.
How do we fix that?
We get on the growth plan. So our town comp plan and small area plan needs to be in the county plan, just like the city of Charlottesville's growth maps and UVA's growth maps are under the county. If they're there, they'll be looked at and considered. That's the #1 step.
But we already told them to do that.
It hasn't happened. So we have to inform their staff, and then you follow up with each individual area head to say, hey, we've just put our plan in your area. We know that you're looking at funding for your budget or for ARP for the federal funding. Here's our plan information that you don't have, and we want you to include it. So it's quite a bit of follow up. But the volunteer fire department, that's another one that I'm worried about, because they're not under the plans, right? They don't have that information in the county planning levels. So there's not a structure in the federal funding. There's a structure for the staffed fire and rescue, but not for the volunteer area. So that's another concern that I have.
So Matt, is that something that you can take the point on getting included, or at least following up what our next steps are? Because it sounds like it's really important.
Let me, I've just asked.
Matt, would you mute? We've got an echo there between the two of your mics. Sorry, Ron.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I did mine. Okay, that's better. I was just talking on the side with Matt. We will set up a meeting with Donna sometime around the middle of next week, and check Laura's schedule so she and I and Matt and Thomas can meet up here one day next week. And we'll get some answers to those questions.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I
Yeah.
suspect that that's something that the board will have to vote on to adopt into those plans. I don't think that that can
Exactly.
happen directly at the staff level, to your question, Stuart.
Okay, yeah, I just was wondering, I had no idea what the procedure was, and I just want to make sure that we were,
Mhm.
someone was taking
Yeah.
the next step.
I mean, they've
Yeah.
already said they're open to it, but we just need to get it in front of
Keep
them.
pushing and get it on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah, especially with this additional funding discussions happening.
Yeah.
So again,
Laura.
that fits under essential town needs, but it's not our budget. It's the others that making sure that they help us take care of ours.
Okay, that feels like pretty good priority setting and immediate follow-up for me. If I can, the action item for this evening, looking at public hearing and what budget we advertise, we've talked about a couple of line item changes that I think we can incorporate and get this ready for prime time. So
Matt, just a comment. I wanted to follow up on something the mayor said. And Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your comment related to the taxes early on. I also do not favor a real estate tax, nor do I think I will favor any version of one. But I thought your comment was helpful at the beginning, and I just want to second that idea that I think as we look at what we have to do, at the very least, recognizing the kind of the trauma and the challenges that people have been through, I don't think it's the right time to bring that into what we're trying to do.
So this line goes to 0, and over on tax rates, the real estate tax goes to 0. Now the whole budget, which is still 1.02 million in spending, is 22,000 in the hole. If I think the waterfront project was the one where we weren't sure how much planning and construction work would get done. Is that one that you want to zero out? Or-
No, I think the one we want to zero out is actually the ARB, because I think there's $11,000 in there right now, and you could take that down to 1. That's certainly one you can move.
And community development can be decreased as well while we figure that out.
Was that $1,000 or $1?
Oh, you can leave it at 1,000. We didn't spend $1,000 last year, but money in there, I guess, says it matters, and we can.
We did. You spent your money to match the facade improvement grant program.
Yeah.
And we had put money in there to do that again this
We
year.
make mailings.
And what was the other one that Laura, you were pointing out a line?
The community development. I guess it's not. Where did you have it?
In the tourism section. The Main Street expenses.
Yes,
At 25?
that's it. Yeah. So definitely reduce that.
If you put that at 12, you have right about a balanced budget. If you put it at 13, you have exactly a balanced budget.
I would put the other 1,000 back in ARP just in case they decide to give a facade improvement grant.
We did apply to the certified local government program, and they do have grants that require a match for that if you want to do it again, Zach.
And about that. Well, council, that is a balanced budget that you could advertise.
Yeah, and with the river, the plantings there, do we have the CSX money confirmed for this fiscal year?
Yes. That shows up as, it is in this miscellaneous category of revenue. There's a couple of different community grants that total up in here. And that goes back into the parks category of, sorry, contract services, the street contract maintenance, and park contract maintenance.
Okay.
Did we want to reduce any of the park planning down as we figure out future plans at all? Or leave that at the 28,000
I thought we were gonna figure that out after your
after the meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say,
So let's leave it. Sounds
just since
good.
we don't
Thanks.
have Lindsay or Eddie here,
Mhm.
just say one more time that there is the option to advertise high and reduce down next
Yeah.
month when you have your full contingency on hand.
Okay.
Even to the point of if you wanted to advertise this in that original format that Matt showed with the 22,000 deficit and save these changes for next month.
These act as the spending caps. We can debate these numbers and adopt something lower than this, but you can't adopt a category spending that's higher than what's shown.
Mhm.
So we won't be able to, for instance, move that ARB line back up without a supplemental appropriation down the road.
That's all right.
Okay.
I like balanced budgets.
I do too.
Okay. Then a motion to call the public hearing on May 17th and advertise the spending categories as shown would be in order.
I will make a motion to call a public hearing regarding the 2021 budget amendments and the 21-22 budget proposal on May 17th with public hearing.
And I will second that.
The one thing I will say, it's almost for certain I will not be at that meeting. Not that it hinges on me at all, but that is almost certain I won't be at that meeting.
All right.
We have
Okay.
several
Yeah, if
groups.
anything contentious comes up, we'll just say it was your idea.
Sounds like a good one.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I value your input, Dan. So if there's a way that we can get your comments or thoughts on different budget categories that we can share in the record, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah. Can you send an email to all of us? Just copy us on your thinking.
Sure, I would be happy to. Yeah,
Thank
what's
you.
happening is right then we have a sequence of several groups that were actually going to be in Charlottesville, and I know that specifically that evening I'm almost certainly going to be somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
I would really, really appreciate your comments.
So we have a motion on the floor. Has it been seconded?
I do not have a second on it.
Second.
Second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? And do we need to call a vote on this or just the raising of the hand?
I think for the advertising, you're fine with a consent.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed? Thank you.
Can I make one request that we walk the public through parts of this presentation as well as maybe some other previous documents? I think it's helpful before we get public comment to sort of give them that context.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yep. With slight updates to trim it down based on the decisions, I can do the same fashion again.
That would be great. Thank you.
Here's how we got here and what's in the proposal.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, does any, that completes the agenda for this evening. Is there anything else anybody has on their mind? Not budget related. Not, I hear much confirmed.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank everybody for this special meeting, for your attendance and your hard work in making these hard decisions. Well, that meeting with Donna set up.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mayor.
Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, y'all. Great job, man.
Bye.
And Laura.